So last session we talked about getting data from the browser all the way through the params hash and into the view. And we looked at the params hash using the key value pairs. We stored them in instance variables that were then available in the view, right? So let's start playing with this calendar a little bit. And I have to stop myself too much so I don't write all your code for you. I know some of you guys wouldn't mind that at all. But if I were to take and start to lay out a calendar, I'd have to do something like a table, right? And I'd open up a row and open up a TD, and I'd put non-breaking space. And then since October starts on Monday, I would put a 1 for Monday, and all the way through I'd have a bunch of these, right? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that would lay out my first row of the calendar, right? But in reality, I'm going to have to do some things with time and figuring out what day the first of the month lands on, and using some loops like we did down here. We're going to loop through these TDs and print them out. So my first step maybe would be to put a loop in here, and I would do something like this. Let's see. 6 dot times do, and then replace this with a variable in the goalpost that I have something to play with, like my day, and replace this with day, and take all these out. All right, so that's one way to create 6 days in a row. I'm going to automatically print out a new table cell one day at a time. But my day has to be what? It's a variable, so I have to put it inside of my ERB tags. So, and I use the equal sign because I want to actually put that out to the screen. Yes? Well, I've already printed out a non-breaking space up here. So that's day 1, and then I need 6 more days after that. All right, so let's see if I can load this. Come on. Pause. All right, so here's my calendar. Here's the table that I have. So it's hard to kind of see that. I'm going to do some inline style and say old style add a border. That's really old HTML1 stuff, but I can see the table now. Now this would be Sunday, so that would be the last of September, and then I would go up from there. Now what's wrong with that? We don't have a 0 day in any of our months. So how would I fix that? How's one way I can fix that? Okay, I can add 1 to my day as I print it out. That's one way to do it. There we go. So I've got all of the days printed out in a calendar, and then I would start my next row, for instance. That's how I might begin developing the calendar. But this starts to become very tedious, like with all of these % signs in the HTML here. It would be a lot nicer if I just had one call that did something like this. I want to output the value of calling a method with the right month and the right year. All right, I might pass 2 pieces of information to a calendar method, and the calendar method, let it print out all of this information here. That makes it a lot simpler. So I'm going to cut this out and have one method here called calendar. Now, if I try to load this here, I'm going to get an error. It says there's undefined method calendar. Nowhere do I have a calendar method. So where could I put the calendar method? I could put it in the controller, right? It could get at information, and I could have that return a string and put that into an instance variable, but that's not good. That's not a good practice. The controller is supposed to have minimal code in it, as small as possible, as well as the views should have minimal code in it. You've already seen how tedious it is to write ERB here with all these percents and stuff. It would be a lot cleaner if I could do that in just normal Ruby code. So Rails knows that, and they give us this concept of a helper file. Now, every time I generated a controller, it created a bunch of files for me. Remember that? It created the controller, some views, some test code, and as well as these helper files. So each one of these helper files goes along with the controller that I have. So there's a page helper that all it is a module. If you remember in Ruby, that's just a way of grouping together classes and methods into one namespace. So they leave this. In reality, I can put this in any of these helper methods, and Rails would find it. It doesn't have to be tied specifically to the view. But doesn't it make sense that if it's going to be in a page, I would put it in my page code? Now, just like the application layout, that is the overall design for the entire site. They give us an application helper, which are methods that would be used across all the views. Anywhere on the site, I might be able to call this method. So for this calendar, I might want to put a little calendar in my sidebar, for instance. And then if they click on that, it would grow up to be the full page calendar. So I'm thinking that I'm going to put it in my application helper. So I'm going to have a method in here. How do I start a method? Define my calendar method. I said it takes two variables, the month and the year. And we end. So I'm going to paste my code in here. Now, obviously, I can't just have HTML like this. I have to create these as what? Strings. Okay, so each one of these has to be a string. So I'm going to change this to be put quotes around this and quotes around this, etc. Around my HTML, we'll fix this up so that it creates one thing. Now, what is the result of calling my calendar method? What is that going to be? We can't do puts inside of our methods, which I tried to force you not to do. So what should your method return? A single string that has HTML in it and all of the variables stuffed into it. It's pre-making the entire table for me, the entire calendar table. So in the end, so I need a variable up here called something like cal string. And we'll start it out by assigning the table beginning. And then we can do things like this. There's other ways to do this. We'll say plus equals to concatenate a table row. We'll add our non-breaking space. Now I don't need the ERB tags anymore. I can just do straight Ruby. Right? This is just straight Ruby. And I'm going to continue to concatenate to my cal string. And I'm going to change this to be something like this. I will quote the entire thing. Take out my ERB code. And make this into a interpolated string. So that creates one string. It evaluates the day plus one, puts it in between the cells. And then this is just a normal end command for my 6 times do. And then I need to append my ending table row and my ending table. All right, so what's the last thing I need to do in this method? Return my cal string, right? I like to specifically return these so I know exactly what it is. Now my method is defined. I can go back and reload my page. It finds the method and prints out the actual HTML code. Isn't that great? Look at that. Got my TDs and everything in there. But it's not HTML. What is this? It's a string, so let's look at the source code. What did it do to my table here? Here it is. There's my table. It made it all encoded. So I have an ampersand GT, which means a greater than sign. So it turned it into a string that is not visible by the browser. I mean, it doesn't render that as true HTML. So why does Rails do that? It hates us. As for security, exactly right. For security's sake, they want to force you to think about the data you're returning to a page, and if it's true HTML that you are okay with, they want you to call a method on your string called HTML safe. So there's a string I can call HTML safe. RubyMine picks it up. That says this string is okay. I'm going to allow that to be spit out as true HTML. So if I go look at that again, reload it, I got my nice calendar again as true HTML. So if you ever see the actual HTML like that, you'll have to add the HTML safe on the string before you put it to the view. And so now my view is very nice. I only have one line that says spit out a calendar, and it takes two values that I'm going to get from the browser itself, from the params hash. And my calendar method then can take those values, create time, figure out the first of the month for whatever month and year they pass into me, print out the whole table all nice and neat for me, and I'm done. Isn't that great? The only other thing I would have to do is perhaps style that, right? So you could style that and change the size of the screen, etc. Let's do a little bit of that just for fun. Where would I change the style of my table? In my CSS, where is my CSS? My assets folder. Oops. Assets under style sheets. And I have a styles.css that I got with this template. And there are no table styles in here that I can see. But, right, so we can make our own. So I can say .table. And I might do well, sorry. Yes, I was thinking in my head that I was going to give an ID. So no, we don't do that. I'm working two places. All right. So we have a table. It's already a defined class. I don't need to put a dot into it. And how do I set the width on the table? I think it's width, and we'll say 200 pixels. And we'll say height of 200 pixels. So now when I reload this, I've got a nice little calendar. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that awesome? So obviously that needs some work. I do all my styling using what is this thing? Firebug. Thank you. Jeez. So I'll go look for my content, find my table, change my height and width. My height doesn't need to be so big. That looks pretty good. My width could be bigger. All right, so there's 325, and let's make this 65. So I'd go back and change this 325, 65. reload my page. And I didn't do it right somehow. I did them wrong. Look at that. So I got to do it differently. And I go back, reload it. And this is why I don't do styling. I hire this out. So there you go. So I got my nice little table. I left the border on it. You can do all of that in CSS directly. All right? Isn't that great? I did the border inline, yes. All right. So let's look at if I wanted to add something now to my table, where would I do that? In my helper, okay? Now's the problem of trying to find your stuff. So let's put a table row in here that is tr and then a td, and I'll do some more inline, which you guys hate, and I'll put October. When I'm just playing with it, this is a lot easier to think about. So now I've got October in the middle. I'd have to align that to the center maybe. And so that's how I slowly build up my calendar to look correct. Now, I haven't done anything with variables yet. I obviously can't just do a non-breaking space and have every month start on Monday. That does not work. I have to do some calculation and math, which you guys hate, actually calculate some things to find out what the beginning day of the week is. And there are methods in Ruby and Rails that help you to do that. We can do the beginning day of the month. It'll tell you what weekday that starts on. W day tells us on a time object what day of the week that is on. So given the day of the week starting at 0, let's look at this. This is 0 here. This would be in October. If I did October 1st dot W day, it would say that W day was 1. So it starts on the first day of the week, or Monday, thinking Sunday is 0 day of the week. So it's 0 based. So I can use those two variables, or that one variable, to print out as many blank spaces as I need, and then fill out the rest of the week with numbers, counting 1 up to whatever I end up to 7. I can only have 7 cells. So the first week is going to be different. It's a specialized week, so you're going to have code just to do the first row. Then the rest of the middle rows are going to be the same. You're just going to print out whatever your day counter is. Might use a day counter, increment that every time you print a cell. When you get to the end of the week, you start a new row until you get to some point. And so your last week of the month has got to be different as well, because you're going to print up until I run out of days of the month, and then you're going to print non-breaking spaces to fill out the rest of the week. So that I leave to you guys. If you did it for me in PHP, the code is very similar. Do not search around on the internet for code like this. There is such a thing out there. Don't do it, because that doesn't help you. You're not learning to write your own code. Yes? You can use your PHP code. I mean, if you spent the time working on that initially, you'll have to obviously convert it to Ruby, but that's not so hard. All right? So if I wanted a link, any questions so far? If I wanted a link in my calendar to go to the previous month, where would I put that code? But in what file in my Rails application? In my helper again. Okay, so if I think I might have another link in here, and I'm going to call it previous month. And obviously we're not doing, we'll do 6 now. And I would fix that and put it all into CSS, etc., but not for now. So if I had a previous month which was equal to the month that they passed me in minus 1, that almost gets me right. So I'm going to put that in here, and then I need to make it a link. So I'm going to use what method to create a link string? Link to, and then I pass it the body of the link, so I'm going to say something like previous. And then where do I want it to go to? All right, so remember in the routes file, when I did the rake routes, it created these variables for me. So I already have I think it was called page calendar path, and I can pass that. That's a method in Ruby or Rails that lets me pass information along to that. So I'm going to pass in a month minus 1, and that will be my link to. The variables that I pass are a string for the key value pairs. Remember, we're going to create key value pairs in our query string. So the key is going to be month, and the value is going to be month minus 1, whatever that is. Right, so let's see if that works. Previous month is now what type of variable? It's a string, okay? Let's see if it actually works. Crash. All right, undefined method minus for nil. So this is a good practicing here. This 8 here is the call to the method, my calendar method, which is in my helper file. So I got to go find it in my helper file. And here I have some error in this code. Ah, very good. So I didn't pass a month. So let's go back to my calendar, and when I call my calendar, I am passing a month and a year, but these had nothing in it, right? Remember, where did I get those? In my controller, which got them from the params hash. So my initial URL into this has to have some month into this. So I'm going to pass in, I'm not using the month yet. I'm going to say, well, we'll just pass them all in there. All right, so October, that was when I was playing with it. We'll do 10. All right, so I can't subtract a 10 because 10 is what? A string. So in my helper again, my application helper, I need to convert this. This is a string to I. I'm not using the year now yet, so it doesn't cause an error yet. There we go. So now I have a link to previous. And if you look at the URL, it says page/calendar $month equals 9. So it did the calculation, 10 minus 1 is 9, and put the key value pair into the URL for me in the link to method. Isn't that great? So I would do the same, obviously, with the next month. But I also have to worry about edge boundaries on these things. I can't just keep subtracting 1 from this. If I had month of 1, then previous minus 1 would be 0. Right, so I have to take into account, if I get to 0, I have to change the year and subtract the year from minus 1 and make the month, what? 12. So I have to worry about going forward and backward around the December-January timeline changes. I'll leave that to you for your stuff. But again, you're going to have to use some time functions in here to actually figure out the first day of the month, but I think I've gotten you started on how to do that. And tomorrow I'll talk about routing a little more and how we can make this URL even nicer looking. All right, any questions? Yes?
Are we going to put mini calendars on every page?
No, I just did that as an example of why I put it in the application helper instead of just the page helper. So that it
will only be a calendar on the calendar page.
Yes, for the assignment purposes. Yes. Any other questions?
What page did you put the call to the method?
All right. So if I'm going to, we'll trace it from the browser. If I'm going to page/calendar, what is the controller here? Page controller, and what is this? That's the action. So that's in the controller method. So here's the calendar, and this is where I get my year and my month from the params hash. I might do some time calculations here, but most of the time I'm going to do that straight in the helper itself. Then what gets called after my action here? The view. So I go to the view, and this is the code that actually calls my helper method. And it makes my view much simpler. I can just do it all in V, not have to worry about the ERB. Yeah.
So like a year and a month, I don't want to get a value from browser, so I put the code I just get from
But then when you click previous and next month, the only way to get that is through the query string. I mean, we could do it as cookies and stuff, but
current value that I just minus of
right.
So I don't have to get a value from a browser that one.
You will if you want to go previous and next. Because if I go previous, I want it to show September, not October. Right? So the only way to do that is through a query string. So I have to do both. I have to get it from the system. If there are no parameters in the URL, I want it to show the current month. If there are parameters in the URL, I want it to show that particular month and year.
Okay, so you want to handle
You have to do both. You have to do both. Okay? Good question. Any other questions? All right, that's enough for today.